everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews, where we continue to interview people doing significant things in our community and people who are visiting our community who have done remarkable things in their past, and they're bringing their talents to our area. The person, though, I'm going to interview today is someone whose name you might know because of the bylines out there for many, many years. Gary Craig, one of my favorites. Gary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, all right. So, I think a lot of people heard about the retirement, but the not so retirement.
Yeah, I stayed active. I started this Substack, which has become a little more not work in a good way. I still enjoy doing it, but so it's sort of taken off in a good way. You'd kind of hope that would happen, but I was a little surprised by it. I'm doing some freelancing. I'm hoping to start a few more book projects. So it's kind of a semi-retirement, but it's all really on my own terms, so which has been nice. I enjoy that.
Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, you're kind of a self-starter, so you probably end up pushing yourself.
Yeah, thank you. That's true. It's there are days where it's like, oh geez, something will happen. Like today, I found out very early there's this judicial misconduct. Somebody was resigning from the bench in one of the towns.
Clarkson, is it?
Exactly. Yeah. And I was like, I always wrote judicial conduct stories, so I quickly pounded that out for Substack, and on my hundreds of subscribers.
Hey, hundreds isn't bad.
Yeah, exactly.
So for those of us who don't really know what Substack is all about,
many, trust me.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about that?
It's it's a new sort of, it's not new, it's been around a while, but it's really in the past year that it's taken off as this kind of social media place for storytelling, et cetera. Sort of, I guess, was it WordPress or whatever in the past.
Yeah.
And it's kind of become that, and it's really taken off. It's it's almost, in some ways, my thread is like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at another social media thread. It's kind of a little overwhelming some days, but it's I think I was lucky in having spent 30 plus years here. I had my byline, as you said, was kind of known to people, so I sort of started with a little bit of a built-in audience already. So that helped me a lot. I think it would be tough to really be starting completely anew if unless there are major names out there that are using Substack for constant stories, et cetera.
How do you make money off of it?
You'd have to really have a good audience. I'm making some money, but it's not a second career. Trust me. Substack takes 10% of it. It's a subscription base.
Oh, okay.
I started the lowest. You can give it all away for free, and the smallest or the cheapest you can do is $5 a month if you decide to go pay. I had planned to do that. I somehow missed when I started that it defaults to $8 a month, and people have been willing to pay it kindly. So I said, okay, I guess I'll just keep it with this. Yes.
All right. Well, I'll have to sign on up.
Please.
I had heard a rumor that you're on Substack, so I gotta get involved there. So you were there when it was Times Union, right?
I was the last person when I retired, who had worked full time and started at the Times Union.
Okay.
Yes.
And so for those who don't know, Times Union and Democrat and Chronicle, even though they were both owned by Gannett, they were two separate papers, and they're in the same building, but the competition was real, wasn't it?
The competition was very real. We're on the same floor, the fourth floor, and there was a separation between us because we shared printers and things like that. And it was honestly called the demilitarized zone because that's where you would see people, but nobody would ever cross into the other side. And I've always wondered, when we consolidated the newspapers, I always wondered who the first person was that actually traveled to the other side.
Yeah.
But I have no recollection of that, yes.
That's funny. It's it almost, I don't know, not comical, that isn't the right word, but nonsensical, because we would have craved to have two papers.
It was such a great time. Both had their strengths. The DNC had a much larger staff than we did at the TU. We were the evening paper.
The TU, I love it.
But we were, I think we were sort of a scrappy underdog in many ways, and we also were very sort of, the writing there. I just learned so much about writing from the people that were there. It was a very sort of writing-driven newspaper too.
Who did you learn from?
Oh gosh, there's so many. The late Sue Smith, who I just, one of the dearest people I've known, and the best combination of reporter, writer. She did an amazing interview with Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler, who's from Irondequoit. She flew all the way out with our photographer Jamie Germano, and he was imprisoned in Walla Walla. And Bianchi's one of these guys, I guess, like a lot of serial killers, thinks a lot of himself. thought that he was going to somehow convince Sue Smith of his innocence. She did this marvelous story that somebody even the other day told me that in communication with Bianchi, he was still complaining about probably 25, 30 years later. But she was just an incredible writer. Patrice Mitchell, who still lives around here. There were so many that, I just learned a lot from.
So it was like, had she been doing that within the last 10, 15 years, she could have done Serial.
Oh, she could have. Yes, she would have been perfect for it. And her writing was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, how lucky were we?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I always tell people, I always, people who have been watching me for a while, my favorite thing is to say that when you're a journalist, you have a backstage pass to life. Which is, you've been in every courtroom. I've been in EDs. I've been on farms. and you name it, I've been there, and I've talked with people. And that's the thing is, people open up with you, so they kind of tell you everything. And the one successful one of the main traits of a successful person, not a trait, a circumstance. That's it. Is they had a mentor. So I always say, no matter where you go, make sure you have someone to learn from. And I don't know if you found that to be the case, but
very much. I mean, my last newspaper, which was 1986 to 1990 in Northern Virginia, small daily, I had a managing editor there who was one of the most driven, sort of investigative editors I've ever had then or since. And he was, to this day, I learned so much from him during those 4 years there.
Yeah, and you know what it is too? So it's not just like, hey, do this, don't do that, but you have now in your mind someone who's dedicated to the craft. And in our case, that's so necessary because there's so many pressures, right? To do this, to not do that. And when you think back, like I had Bill Carey, he was a radio TV guy in Syracuse. It's like you almost want to, and he's unfortunately passed, but you don't want to disappoint that person. You want to live up to their standards.
Very true. And my guess is, knowing you, and the thing is, is the longer you do this, you kind of try to pass on what you've learned. I'm sure you're doing that here, and I try to do what I could at the DNC. And it's just in hopes we sort of keep that trend going.
Yeah, no, I hear from a lot of people who have passed through the DNC, but as I've noted to you, and I'll say it now, I don't care if it embarrasses you, but you just being in the market and doing what you do, but every time that we saw you out and about, you were so willing to kind of guide us in the courtroom, because there's stuff that I don't know still, and you were always there to help. So that's why I've always considered you the Dean of Rochester Journalism.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
Well, it is what it is. But you also got into books over the years. So you got 7 million, and then a title that no one knows after 7 million.
7 million. A cop, a priest, a soldier for the IRA, and the still unsolved Rochester Brinks heist. I think that's it. Yes.
Yeah. So Phyllis,
Sure.
I've looked into the Brinks just because of my job, but it's a fascinating because it was. Initially, it just looked like a robbery, but there's so much more.
Yeah, and it wasn't. It was the characters that made it. As I've said before, this was not Ocean's 11 by any means. This was not a sophisticated robbery. It was just a Brinks depot ripe to be robbed, and got robbed for 7 million, 7.4. But you had the characters where you had this fellow who'd served time in prison, a member of the IRA. You had a Melkite priest in New York City who was convicted of hiding the cash, who had not IRA connections, but was incredibly sympathetic to the Irish Republican Army. You had a retired cop here who was suspected of being the inside guy. He was a guard there at the Brinks Depot the night it was robbed. He was acquitted at trial. So when I first went down to New York and wrote about the arrest, which was the first writing I'd actually done about it, I didn't cover the heist at all. I immediately started thinking about a book, because it was just, the characters are so rich. And I talked to somebody, a good friend who was a lawyer for Father Pat, that's the priest, and interviewed Father Pat in prison, who continues to claim his innocence, and put it on the shelf for years, and then came back to it like 2011, 2012 after some other stuff. And just the characters just make the story.
Yeah, and I think that's how most stories are, the characters. Yeah. So how do you do, because I've had a friend out in Colorado who is a journalist as well and has decided to do very similar type of work. I mean, I don't know how you pull the trigger on something like that, just with how busy we are.
It's interesting because a number of people have approached me after my one book and my co-written book, which is The Prison Guard's Daughter with Dean Miller about Attica, but mine were not normal. I mean, what I'm hoping to start on now, I think, would be more of a normal process. I mean, mine evolved from things I'd covered for years.
So you already had a lot of material.
I had this rich backlog of information. It was, and I accumulated it, and I could just sort of nibble at it, and maybe I'll write a chapter here, a chapter there, and then when I really, once you have the contract, I talked to the office about taking some time off to really work on it. So it wasn't, I think, the normal process. I have an idea, I've got to do all the work now, then I've got to shape it into a book. Whereas I had so much of it at my hands already.
Fair. I mean, it's still a huge undertaking. But.
It's definitely work. But if it's that was the beauty of it. If it was stories that thankfully I wasn't relying on a livelihood, because if I did, I would have really been struggling. But it's stories that I love, that I wanted to transform into something bigger.
Yeah,
and that's what helped.
How did you get into journalism? I've never asked you this. How did you get into journalism?
I love to write from a very early age. I got into some college newspaper. I was actually the editor my junior year, my small college, Randolph-Macon in Virginia, and but I love to write, and I came out of college. I was like, I'd still like to get paid regularly, so I went into a small newspaper, rural Virginia, Farmville, Virginia, and it's kind of started there. The crazy thing was I found that I actually like the reporting part, whether it's interviews, whether it's digging into documents, et cetera, and as much as the writing, and probably eventually even more than, which got to be a headache because I would just report forever. And I'm like, oh my God, when am I ever going to write this story? And the writing sort of, sadly, kind of became secondary to me for a part of my career, I think. But that was it. And then the newspaper, I started to love the work so much. And I just kept doing it.
And did the DNC or the Times Union come a calling, or how did that work?
Kind of, yes. The paper I worked at Northern Virginia, the Lake Potomac News, 2 of my 4 newspapers are no longer with us. An editor there came up here to Rochester for the Times Union, and she spent like a year and a half saying, come join us. It's like, no, I'm fine. And then finally, I came up, did the interview. Doug Mendelero, great guy, was my editor. Interviewed Doug.
Yeah, he was over at the diocese for a while.
Exactly, and a number of people, and came up. And then, of course, Debbie Henley, the editor who lured me up here, my family was still in Virginia. It was crazy. We just had a baby. I moved up here. My wife and our other then 4-year-old daughter moved in with my in-laws who lived in Northern Virginia. And the one person I knew here was gone by the time I got here. She went to Newsday to be an editor, so I knew nobody. We got here. My wife and family moved here. The winter's brutal. The ice storm hits in March of '91. So we'd been here like 7 months because they moved in August here, or however, not longer than so. But and it was, my wife looked at me like, what have we done?
What have you done? What have you done?
That's more, yeah. And then we've come to love the place so much. But that first year, because she was home, she'd been teaching in Northern Virginia, so she was home with 2 little ones, and we knew no one. The winter was incredibly oppressive with the ice storm as a capper. So, but then thankfully things improved.
Yeah, there was a summer.
There was exactly
a summer,
yes.
And and so you call. I know I see you at the Brighton Library all the time.
Yeah.
You've definitely settled in. Do you plan on sticking around here, you think? Or?
Oh yeah. We decided. We lived in the city the first 10 years. We moved to Brighton in 2000, and we still have family in the South. One of our daughters lives there now. One is here, and we talked about it probably like 5-6 years ago, where we had at one point still talked about, upon retirement, moving back to like maybe Charlottesville, Virginia. We have family in Virginia, North Carolina. And we just said, just like this has sort of become home in so many ways. Our social networks, if I wanted to do the sort of work on the sideline that I'm doing now, I could never do it somewhere else.
Is that because your reputation?
Exactly. Just be starting fresh. So, we do love the area, and it offers, I'm always amazed at people that can't find something to do in Rochester. It's just, I don't know how you can. Our problem is there's too much that we want to do.
Well, and actually you have inspired me. I know, so I have a son who's going to be 14 next week, and our lives revolve around him, and my wife has a wonderful job now too over at Food Link. So we're very focused, classic, belly of the beast, career kid. But years ago, I saw you at the Jazz Fest, and you had the thing, the lanyard, and you're like, oh yeah, I get the pass, I take a week off or whatever it is. And I said, I know that things will relax for me when I can get a club pass.
Exactly.
And take a week off and just go see all the shows.
Oh, and my wife started that years and years ago as a Christmas present. Somehow she wraps it every year in a way I'm surprised. I don't know how that's probably a commentary about me. But yeah, and then she started getting 2 so she could go. And then it's my favorite week of the year.
Oh, I mean, it just shows you can be an appreciator of the things that Rochester has to offer.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's just one. And there's so many. I'm a Fringe Fest fan. There's so many others I love. So,
yeah, and then not only do you get to enjoy, you go to New York City, everything's established. Yeah, you have new projects and all that, but like here, you've got to witness and report on, but be part of the growth of Rochester. Yes, the 90s were tough with in the early thousands, but like look at what's happened in the last 15, 20 years in Rochester.
It really is something. I mean, I go through our old neighborhood. Actually, we lived around the corner from here, down a few blocks on Amsterdam Road.
Okay.
And it was nice. But what this area has sort of become in the last 30 plus years is beautiful, beautiful neighborhoods around here.
Oh my God, the culinary scene, and again,
the culinary scene, yeah,
it's amazing. And I'm so glad that you're getting out and about and doing that. So I do want to mention the other book that you did, sure. The prison guard's daughter, Attica. I mean, that must have been a tough story to tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier for me than Dee, who's the subject of the book. It's her memoir. Dee Quinn Miller, who lost her dad, Billy Quinn, was the first person killed in the uprising. He was a corrections officer there, and Dee is just I will never cease being amazed by her fortitude, her bravery, her resilience, and that she wanted to look. She was either 5 or 6. I should remember because I wrote it, but 5 or 6, when this happened, and she was insistent and later in life upon finding out what happened. And she befriended, former folks who'd been incarcerated there, obviously a number of corrections officers who still live in the area that knew her dad. And she sort of crossed these bridges that, especially now in this kind of this world where the schism seems so wide and people unwilling to bridge them, that I was always so moved by what she did. And she got to be friends with Frank Big Blacksmith, who was one of the inmates who later, led the successful, was resolved with a settlement, this successful suit by the prisoners. And I always marvel at her strength, and it was an honor to be able to sort of co-write the memoir with her.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I mean, obviously you've been in journalism for decades. I think it would have been easier for us to have been, born in the 40s and then start journalism in the late 50s, early 60s, and be there for the high water mark of the 80s,
exactly.
And 90s, especially for TV and print. You were the canary in the coal mine. We're doing what we can on the TV side. And it's all blending, of course, with digital stuff. But how difficult has it been for you to kind of watch the decline of newspaper and print?
It's hard. It's really, really hard. And I don't want it to sound like a negative commentary on my. The DNC, because I think with the staffing they have, they're doing a tremendous
I still read them. I get the Sunday paper. They're doing what they can.
They really, really are. It's wonderful. There's a group of, there's mid-level reporters there, mid-career, I should say, and and then some younger reporters are just stellar and people. But it's just, the constant thinning of staff was just painful. And that, to be honest, was partly, I'm at an age where was ready to retire, And this is more. This was not anything that was management driven. This was really me. Is that more stuff that I saw that was going uncovered, that we used to cover. Talking about arts, but things like that. But even the level of government coverage we used to give and all. And I don't want to sound like a martyr, but I felt this almost sort of responsibility to try to fill some of those holes. Yeah. And it just gets harder and harder. And it was nothing. For probably 10 years. My review said you should write less, you don't need it. But it was just I felt this sort of weird personal responsibility, I guess, as part of the community to kind of try to do what I could. And it may sound strange, but it's tiring. It really was tiring.
It is. Someone presented a term that stuck with me, which is moral injury. So you just see these things and then you feel guilty because they're not happening because, you and I know how important they are, whether it's a Hilton Town Board meeting or, they're covering this big project. And we used to have hyper-local outlets to even help us out with that. And those have gone.
Yeah, they really, really have. And, it's just, whether the towns and nothing is, I was telling somebody the other day, you guys here at 8, you have a sort of a different approach than, say, 13, which has a different approach than 10. XXI has its own approach, and there's the Rochester Beacon, and there's the DNC, and Minority Reporter, and a number I'm probably. And I think if you digest everything that's out there in the community right now, you can get the picture that you used to be able to get maybe from just individual outlets, and everybody still sort of had the turf, but everybody was covering a lot more because we had so many more people to do it. It was just the arithmetic of it.
Oh yeah.
But it's such a different beast now. It is hard to watch.
Yeah, it's tough to live through, and we're trying to do our best to stay afloat. And then it doesn't help either when politically we become the punching bag, and you know I always say it doesn't matter whether it's left or right, because it comes at us from both sides. This is not both sides, it just does.
Yeah.
And that's very frustrating, because I think that when those who are powerful and don't have scruples, we're such an easy target because we don't fight back. We kind of just report, and they want to control the narrative, and we, those of us, we'll relay best we can what they have to say, but it serves them well for us to be less trusted, less powerful. And you know what? They're winning.
It's frustrating. It just the part that's the most frustrating is just the complete abandonment of facts, or the unwillingness to accept facts. I mean, I will go on sort of social media, and not playing either side of the political, just to see something that's factually incorrect, and say, try to point out, to say, here, you're wrong. I've done it on both sides, and sometimes people, like I had a guy last week acknowledge, oh, you're right. And he checked out the article. Like,
you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's like, I know. I was like, that. The reason I remembered it because it was so stunning.
Yeah.
I remember one guy I sent to probably 7 different news outlets to point out that he was wrong. And each time it's like, oh, sorry, liberal media, can't believe it. It's like, it's like, okay, at what point, what do I have to give you to believe that you're wrong about this?
Yeah, do I have to go get the original documentation myself, go to the Library of Congress or what have you? Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And, there are still a solid base of people who want what we offer. I hope that the pendulum shifts, in this day and age with AI and everything like that. If they know, I know a Gary Craig, I know, whomever is out there, and say, I'm going to follow them because I'm just so tired of being deceived. Yeah,
you hope so. And I mean, everybody, you guys, the other TV stations, the DNC and all, everybody's working hard every day to have it right. And, more often than not, a vast percentage of the time, it's right. And that's the part that frustrates me, is people just won't accept a foundation of facts when it's put in front of them.
Yeah, that is tough. And especially coming from you, where you're like, what agenda do you think I have? I've been in this market for 30 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I shop at the same grocery store. Do you think I'm being paid by some
that's
foreign government to do this?
Yeah, it's like there's somebody who's like, I remember one time, it was after, this is years ago, it was a story, and I had a radio, this was many, many years ago, it was probably mid-90s, and I'd done a story, something related to county government. And I had a radio show on it. It's not even anybody that I think is involved in radio talk now. It was like one of the local stations. And I'm listening to this conversation. I guess this is, at least I'm saying this isn't completely new. This conversation about as if we'd had this sort of secretive meeting where we were going to declare in the newsroom the direction of this story, which was completely factually laid out. It's like, one, we didn't have time to have secret meetings.
I know, that's the funniest part. I always want to invite those people. Do you even know the insanity in which we work?
Exactly. It's it is the old, just trying to keep it on the tracks. And it was just so bizarre. I'm sitting there listening, like, it was so completely separate from everything. And the story was completely factual and fair and everything. So, but
no. I had one a couple of years ago saying, well, I don't blame you because I know you're just being told what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And I'm like, told what to say? I don't get talked to by anybody. Yeah. Sometimes I want someone to come and talk to me. If you have a problem with this, that's on me, because I am not being told what to say.
I had somebody the other day comment on my Substack. They said, oh, yeah. They said they didn't know. They were trying to figure out I've got to get a card with my Substack thing on it, because a lot of people have no clue, understandably, what it is. And they were saying, oh, yeah, I was talking to somebody, started following you on Substack. And they said, oh, it's so good now that he can write what he wants instead of what he's being told to write. It's like, I told the person, I was, in all the years, did I have my beefs with Gannett? Yeah, I was on the front line for a lot of people of the union fighting him. Never in my 30 plus years there did I see a sign of anybody trying to direct the news coverage towards a different.
Yeah, not once. No. Not once. In fact, that makes me feel like maybe I haven't done anything controversial enough to get someone to tell me not to run something. I'm like, what have I done?
What's wrong?
Yeah, what's wrong with me? Because no one's telling me not to run anything.
That's right. Damn it. That's right.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy world out there. What you obviously do get folks in the newsroom over the years saying what should I do? What should I not do? Or you just know that they want to know and they're not asking. What's your recommendation? What's kind of your pep talk or your advice that you pass along to them?
That's good. It's often sort of kind of personality generated because, it's funny. I had this conversation with somebody just at my retirement party, or sometime during retirement. My retirement seemed to stretch out a few months, but and it's a lot of times, especially with a small staff, you can end up in sort of a coverage area that you're not having that much fun. And I said, one thing is find the stories, even if you're only doing them, occasionally, that mean something to you. And sometimes I think we get so driven by focus groups. I don't know how I don't know if they're still around much anymore. But the thing is, if you find those stories that are meaningful to you and you tell them in a way that I think captures why it's meaningful to you and why it's important that it be told, people will latch onto it. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something that's going to show up in a focus group conversation. It's something, this issue we need to highlight. And so that's why I'm constantly telling sort of reporters, even if it's something, management may have you doing something else, but make sure you're carving out time to do those stories. And then hopefully eventually it'll be, that's kind of what happened with me in a way, is I was to a point finally where I think they stopped telling me what to do because I was finding so many stories that I wanted to do on my own that I like doing. Yeah.
It's funny, that's pretty much in line with what I always say. This might not be exactly how you'd say it, but I basically say, take a 5-day work week. 3 out of 5 days, you're not going to do the story you want.
That's good. Yes.
You're just not. Now, in that vein, it may turn out to be one of the best days you've ever had. So don't go into it, thinking, what a life that I have. You might meet one of the most interesting people in that story that you don't like, or you get called to another story while you're covering that.
Exactly.
So don't blow off the day as it's done. So I say that, but be that as it may, 3 days out of the week, and then you're gonna have 2 days where you do stories you like. One of those days is gonna be difficult because of deadline, and it's gonna be stressful. You might get, if you're lucky, you'll get that one day where you do the story you want, and there isn't a huge amount of stress. And if you can accept that ratio, you're gonna be fine.
That's perfect. And you do get those days that are just you never forget come out of the blue. I mean, it's not like I'm starting this day. I know this is going to be one of those days. We had, I don't know if you're familiar with the Public Universal Friend.
No.
It's amazing history. It's funny because the Friend is sort of coming back into the conversation now, because the Friend was Jemima Wilkinson, who lived during the Revolutionary War, went into a coma, everybody thought she was dead. She came back alive as the Public Universal Friend, this religious figure who traveled to what is now Yates County and built one of the first communities, and was the first sort of national female. Well, is where the stories sort of changed some of the years. Was a long time lauded as the first woman to really start a religious community and all. But she took on, after Jemima Wilkinson awoke, a non-binary approach to life. She did not want to be referred to female or male.
Okay.
And if you look Jemima Wilkinson up now, you see a lot of return talking about the character. Crazy. Oddly, I end up, my dear friend Steve Orr and I, a former reporter at the DNC, we were writing about...
I've interviewed him. He's great.
I love Steve. Late John Nicola, who was a criminal who, that's a whole other story. But John knew the history of the Friend. And so when we're doing profiles on John, we come across this saga of the Friend in Yates County. And
there you go.
The Friend's burial place is still a mystery because they thought the body would be basically exhumed and desecrated. One of the great, and I think Steve would agree with this too, we talk about it a lot. We were doing the stories of Nicola, but we decided to write about the Friend a little. We find where there's a burial plot of her followers in the woods in Yates County. There's a way to get to it off a public road. We didn't know. We knock on the door of this farmer whose land abuts it. And he goes, I'll take you back there, on his tractor, and then takes us in the wood. This guy was a retired Philadelphia homicide detective who decided to go into organic farming. And the time we had with him, we crossed the road, which is where the Friend's house was, which is on the National Registry, I believe. And then I believe it's owned by a Mennonite family now. But then the woman who owned it, Rena Florence, who's since deceased, she was almost 100 then. Yeah. And she was this chain-smoking, bourbon-drinking, near centenarian. Got the right word right?
Yeah, you got it.
I had to think about it. And we did all this in like 4 hours, these two incredible personalities. And it was just on a lark that we decided to stop at these places. And I had something recently, it made me read about the Friend, and it made me rethink about that whole day and how much fun it was.
That's a perfect example. And, by the way, some people are going to listen to that and go, That sounds like not fun at all. But to me, that sounds like one of the best days of my life.
was
Like as a
wonderful.
storyteller,
Yeah.
It's just, you couldn't picture anything better.
Yeah, it was such a great day, and it just was completely unplanned. We just said on a lark, we're going to knock on a couple of doors and see what happens.
Unbelievable. Well, Gary Craig, I could be doing this for the next 2 hours.
Thank you, Adam. This is wonderful.
But
Thanks.
this has been wonderful. We're going to have you back. I'm going to get on that Substack that all the kids are into. And
10 more seconds, please. And I'm not just doing this because you're kind enough to have me here, but thanks for all you do for this community.
Come
And no, seriously, it's appreciated by so many. Thank you.
all right, Gary Craig, thank you so much. I appreciate those kinds words. That's Gary Craig talking to us. We're more than thrilled to have him, and we're more than thrilled that you chose to spend your time listening to the Adam Interviews segment.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.